Hello there, my name's Richard Carr. I'm the Life in the UK instructor for the Refugee and Migrant Centre in Wolverhampton. Sorry I can't be with you now, but I hope this little video will give you as much information as you require. Right, okay then, what is Life in the UK? Life in the UK test is the test that you will need to do if you're applying for a British citizenship. Also, probably you will also need to do an English language test as well. The way to find out about that is email or give a phone call to your advisor, because everybody's visa is different, so you'll need special instructions on that. Anyway, let's see what we're doing about this Life in the UK. What is the Life in the UK? There we are. That is the book provided by the Home Office. You can get one at the booksellers or by Amazon, price £12.99. Now this is the book that we use all the time. There are other books on the market, but having said that, they don't do it exactly as the Home Office require, because their words can be slightly different. Their diagrams and the graphs can be quite fine. But having said that, if you want it word for word, and we do need it word for word, the Home Office book is the only book to go. Okay then. Secondly, that is a book on Home Office questions. Similarly published, but you will need to book that specially. And each test is 24 questions long. There's 17 in that book. Having said that, these are not the only questions that the Home Office can give you, because they can think up a test on the day itself and put that into the question system. They've got thousands. This is but a good, fairly idea of what the Home Office questions are. I'll go into a bit more detail later on. Now, with the Home Office book, there are 3 parts to the book itself. Firstly, let's find the sections here. That's number 1, 2 and 3. Right, there we are. The first section, that's about 60 pages long. That's all to do with British history. Everything from the very beginning, from the Stone Age man all the way through the various decades and centuries. There's an important one, Henry VIII. Lot of questions about him, so I'm surprised if you don't get a question about Henry VIII and his 6 wives, by the way. That's the most important thing. And then Shakespeare. Oh yes, Shakespeare's another popular question. Only a few years later than Henry VIII, but having said that, just happened to be the same part of the book. Anyway, we go through all sorts of things. The flag. Don't think it's easy. There are quite a few flags in there, not just the one. And then we go through all sorts of periods like the Industrial Revolution, and then we do things like the Second World War. That's important, very topical at the moment. We just finished 75 years celebrations after the war, and that's our most famous Prime Minister, Winston Churchill. Anyway, he's not the only one in the book. Then we go on, because you'll find out the other Prime Minister is Mrs. Thatcher. Anyway, there's lots of other things involved in the history, all to do with migration, First and Second World War, as I say. And then there's also a list of inventors who invented everything from the cash machine to the jet engine to TV. So that's the history section. You'll get about 8 questions on that in the test itself. The second bit is all to do with life in UK, and there's a few more lists here of people, their dates they were born and the things that they did. Anyway, we go through bits more about geography. You'll start off with geography in the first place anyway. Secondly, you will have to do things like Christian days of the calendar. We are run by the Christian calendar here, by the way, so that's how it is, particularly because all the dates in our years ever since the birth of Christ have resulted from the birth of Christ. So in other words, that is why we are now 20 and 20 years since the birth of Christ. Anyway, lots of other things, dates of April Fool's Day. That's the cenotaph, by the way. Oh, sport, that's a big section, because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pages on here, and you're almost bound to get one sports question. And just to give you a clue, and the Home Office are not telling anything, the only people that know about the questions are going to be you when you get there, but the Home Office do concentrate, and quite rightly too, on the contributions of disabled athletes all the way through our Olympic history. Anyway, that's not just all. Music, everything all to do with our religious and English composers, particularly people like Elgar, Sir William Walton, Ralph Vaughan Williams. We'll send you lists about all these people anyway. Artists, particularly the classical artists, you know, the big landscapes like seas and forests and all sorts of things. Most of the artists are in there all the way up to 1900, but a few modern ones as well. Then we go through architecture. Oh, that's another big subject actually. There's about 4 or 5 pages on there. Literature. Who wrote what, either in books or in poetry. And there's a list of famous authors in there, of which I think the most famous ones are people like Jane Austen and Charles Dickens. And there's a selection of people's poetry there as well. Gardening, you know we English like our gardens. Films, that's my favourite topic. I've been studying films for over 50 years now, and where I am now I've got a whole range of film posters and everything. Much can be done like with the UK, because that's a famous film that came out in 1967, Man for All Seasons, all about Henry VIII. And there's other things I can show you as well, like The Jungle Book, written by Rudyard Kipling. He's in the book, one of our authors. Cromwell, that's a famous film from 1970, all about the Civil War. Recommend that. If it comes on the TV, I'll tell you all about that. And also films like, there we are, Anne of the Thousand Days, 1970, almost the same time as Cromwell. That was a very, very good period in English cinema for historical films, and they're very good for learning if you watch them on the TV. Anyway, that's films and section for you. Oh, by the way, they do give you the 10 best films that they think are good English films. Even more about life in the UK today. What have we got here? So, yeah, these are tourist places. Of course, the popular ones like Big Ben, which is the clock, by the way, not the tower. Also places like Northern Ireland, which is Devil's Causeway, and also countryside places in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. Remember, the UK is not just England, it's the whole of the UK, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland as well. And you could probably get about 8 questions on there, so that's about 2/3 of the questions. And the third part of the book is all to do with the law. There we are. There's the Queen, because the Queen has to sign every law into law, and we have to show allegiance to the Queen by obeying the law. And the Home Office do like that bit about obeying the law, democracy and behave as a proper citizen. But we have to show you how the law is made, all the way from the Houses of Parliament, all through the various stages like the House of Commons and the House of Lords, and what happens in elections to get a member of Parliament into Parliament. And then go through the government and how the government execute those laws, not only in Westminster, but also in local areas like Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. And going on from the law, you will also need to know how the law itself works. There we are, there's the police, but the police only carry out the law. They don't do any criminal judgments. These are done by the courts, and there are about 4 or 5 different courts depending on how serious the offences you are alleged to have committed. And then the Home Office do like to have a go on about things like fundamental principles at the law, democracy and things like that. And also they do like nowadays to talk about values of responsibility, democracy again. And you're always bound to get a question, because it's quite popular, on things like environment, recycling and things like that.